Okay, for those of you that could hear, a quick snippet of I Fought the Law and the Law Won by The Clash, which leads us very nicely onto our next speaker, who has been fighting the law and winning, which is amazing. We're going to find out how you can do that. So Claudine Jane from Warrior Law is our next speaker and represents a name many of you already know, Warrior Law, a team that's been quietly active for more than 30 years, guiding men and women to comprehend the difference between what's legal and what's lawful. Do we know the difference? And helping people reclaim self-determination and freedom of the soul through practical remedy. Now, some of you might remember Warrior Law's founder, our favourite Bushman, Zev, who was here with us last year. He's had to attend another matter elsewhere this weekend, and he sends his apologies. But have no fear, the other 50% of Warrior at Law is right here with us. Claudine Jane is a powerhouse of grounded wisdom. Her background spans mind, body, soul, wellness, self-sufficiency, and empowerment. She's all about the meat and potatoes of lawful living. Covering backs while we learn to navigate and ultimately step aside from the system with confidence and comprehension. Please join me in welcoming Claudine Jane from Warrior at Law.
Hello, I have one little request. I may be petite, but I'm quite loud, so I'm not going to use the microphone. I don't need one. So can you hear me at the back? I know you can. I would really love it. I'm not here to present. I'm here to have a nice little warm yarn. So I have a sincere request that if you are at the back, I don't bite, always. I would love you just to come down so we can join in a circle of conversation. Don't feel obligated, but if you move to the forward, to the front, you won't be, I don't ask you to do anything, but I would love you to move closer to the front so we can have a little chat and I can share some stories. Thank you so much. So yes, as mentioned, Zev, the Bushman warrior, is not here today, and I don't look like Zev. I don't have a long beard. So you're going to have to make do with 50% of Warrior at Law. I'm the garden fairy variety of Warrior at Law. Now, some of you know Warrior at Law. We've been around for a pretty long time, long before COVID, in the early 90s. And Zev predicted a lot of what has happened. And we all thought, even me, I thought he was a little bit crazy, right? Anyway, I sit here today because he wasn't crazy, and a lot of what he thought would happen has, fortunately or unfortunately. To be honest, it's not all unfortunately, so I'm going to share a few little bit of magic sparkles that I do about a few things. Now, the topics that I'm going to share are quite in depth. And a couple of things. We've been listening to some amazing content this morning and our brains are a little full. Also, we want lunch. So, I'm going to share a little bit and then I will share with you some amazing access to free, complimentary education if you feel aligned that some of the things that I drop today are of interest to you. Also, we'll be here to have a yarn at any time down under the canopy. So, the first thing that I invite you to do is something my partner reminds me to do all the time, and that is breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Because when we breathe together, we remember something very vital. We remember who we are. We were never meant to breathe alone. This is why I love the Freedom Summit. We were here last year, and literally before the summit finished, Zev and I told Kelly, what's the date of next year? And the date of the next year after that, and after that. It's our favourite event in our calendar. So, get comfy. There's no need to take notes. There's some Warrior at Law members here in the crowd. You know I'm pretty efficient. I will make sure that you get all the content emailed to you afterwards. You won't even need to remind me, will they, Karen? No? I will be sending that to you. Alrighty, so get comfy. I'm just going to share a few little stories before we fill our bellies with some yummy food. Okay. These are just humble thoughts from Warrior at Law and myself. I'm speaking to the converted in this room, and Gigi shared a lot of these topics, and I'm going to talk to you about how we put that into practical purpose, because control thrives in isolation, in the I, when we make it just about ourselves, the individual. Self-determination and freedom of the soul lies in the we, in the collective. In the topic of this weekend. Very simple. Community. So we've been told that law and order means safety. It's to look after us. That obedience is virtue. So polite of us, isn't it, to be obedient? And that control equals progress. But control is not power, it's pacification. It's the theatre set. It's the illusion of authority that hides our natural right to govern ourselves, the right to self-govern and freely associate. And guess what? The system gave us wonderful international covenants, laws and treaties that give us the right to self-govern and freely associate. Thank you so much. I'm going to pick and choose what I use from now on. So, I'm not a fighter. Again, you know, people think I'm a little feisty thing, but I'm not a fighter. I learnt early on, probably about 5 years before COVID, that I wanted to be independent from this system. And I was sick of fighting the system. I wanted to save everyone. I wanted to save the whole world, including myself and my family, because it starts with our family first, right? Then I thought, you know what, I am sick of fighting this, and I'm probably going to get a stomach ulcer and get unwell. And it made me think. And I had wonderful mentors, like Zev at Warrior at Law, and some other great educators in this space. What if, instead of stepping in line to fight, right, what if we just stepped aside? We don't have to withdraw from life by doing that. We actually get to step back in. Because when we remove ourselves from the definition of a spectator, instead I decided to be a participant. But I don't want to participate in their fraud. I don't want to participate with the pedos and the criminals. Not really. I don't want to be a consumer any longer. Gigi, I've got to tell you, the way you explained, especially with young people, how they just consume, and they're programmed, they're born into that, right? Where's the education to learn to be a creator? And it starts with us. You don't have to, you know, one step at a time. We can't eat the elephant all at once. There are some amazing living men and women who are doing things like creating that amazing building of education. But let's just start at home. Let's learn, let's reteach ourselves to be our own creator. Because then we're no longer compliant citizens, we become self-reliant custodians. Instead of fighting for our rights, and look, there are some amazing community groups that have popped up since COVID, right? So this is not disrespect to that, but it may be just something to consider. Instead of fighting for your rights, Again, that's about I. What if we remembered about our responsibility? Our responsibility to be custodians here. Not my, me, but custodians in community. Because as a group, where there is genuine, that comes from love. That comes from remembering who we are. Because where there is love, nothing is no longer too much trouble. And there is always time to do that. We've been programmed to be reactive, make knee-jerk decisions, instant gratification. So, what if we did just remember to breathe? And remember, we don't need to make that decision on a Friday. We have the whole weekend. Sit, breathe, reflect. Make it on Monday or Wednesday. I always think, is this situation, will it implode if I don't make this decision now? Do I really need to have that toy right now? Because if I want instant gratification, I'd have to become the debtor and get a credit card and then buying into that fraudulent system. What if I just wait? What if I have some patience? Savor the flavour, right? So, that's what my little ramble is about today. It's about remembering the we. Us here, a collective. So I'm going to touch on a couple of concepts, and I will always say a disclaimer. If you would like to dive deeper into anything that I share today, Warrior at Law offers completely free education on every word that's coming out of my mouth. Okay, warrioratlaw.org. So we're going to look at the two highways that we see as the dual living on planet Earth, and also the boiling frog concept. And again, I'm speaking to the converted in this room, okay, which is a privilege, thank you. So, we live in a world with two highways, or two jurisdictions, however you want to look at it. So we've got the public highway. We all know that one. Most of us were programmed into that. It started with the first contract of the birth certificate, right? That's the public highway, the public jurisdiction, GovCorp. It is ruled by policy and statutes. And then we have the alternative highway. Some call it the private highway. I don't really believe in that. I'll touch on that in a minute. But it's an alternative jurisdiction. It is a place where we know that there is more to offer. We know that it's ruled by critical thinking, comprehension, and whether we decide to accept offers, whether we consent, whether we decide to contract in or not, because we do have a choice. I don't know if you've heard of Zev's analogy. They want us to think we have options. They want us to think we have free choice. But they're only offering us tea or coffee, right? So, what if there's tea and coffee here that I'm offering you, you come into my house, but behind the counter, there's filtered water. What would Zev say? There's top shelf whiskey, right? There's a beautiful cold pressed juice. They're also on offer. We just weren't sure that we could ask for them. It's about asking the question. So, back to this word private. I don't like to call it private because there's really no such thing. And again, since COVID, there's some amazing, I call them the truther, sovereign, freedom, private movements. Those communities have beautiful hearts and most of them mean well. But I don't believe there's such a thing as living in the private. To genuinely, factually live in the private, you would need your own currency, your own hospital if you choose to use a hospital, your own education facilities, your own roads. You can't drive on their roads anymore, right? You'd basically need your own country or planet, and that's not very, you know what? Maybe if I was a billionaire, I could give it a go. But we're not billionaires. If you are in this room and you are a billionaire, please let me know. Because we will get on that private space shuttle and we will set this up. Now, the thing is, we've got these two highways, we've got these two lanes, and they exist on the same planet, our planet. The only difference is we didn't know that we can pick and choose when we drive in each lane, because we can. So we need to focus on, are we going to stand on the public highway today? Or are we going to stand on this alternative jurisdiction highway, the one they don't really want us to know about that exists? All right, so I'm going to touch on a concept that you are all very well versed in. So you know that if you drop a frog in boiling water, it's going to jump out. But if you heat the water slowly and it adjusts, the frog will just stay there. It'll think it's nice balmy little spa until it's too late and they're in a French restaurant on a dinner plate. So that's how control is built. We're aware of that. It's not overnight, it's gradually. So I was never one for doing very good at dates and names in history at school, hence why I have the notes in front of me. Because I walk this path, I hold it at the highest responsibility that anything coming out of my mouth today is firm in fact. Not hearsay, not conspiracy theory, not something taken out of context, just fact. So please bear with me while I'm reading my notes. So, for those of you who did love history, you'll be able to help me out. Let's go back to the 1700s. That's where the empires were expanding and central banks were born. Debt quietly replaced land as the measure of value until we get to the 1900s. The Fabian tortoise reformers taught governments to change slowly, allow them to be frogs in boiling water. And how did that happen? And again, Gigi, you were just a blessing to me because we talked about education. They were programmed through indoctrined education and infiltration instead of having revolution. They learned centuries before that the revolutions didn't really work. All right, so let's just slowly ease them into it until they realised it's too late. Now, by the 2000s, we welcomed smartphones, cashless systems. There were already forms of digital ID back in the early 2000s, tools of convenience that became the architecture of control. And then we all know about the great global pause with the flu, right? A rhinovirus that's easily looked after. Have some ginger and some honey and drink a lot of fluids, okay? But no, okay, so we were told though that the measures put in place were just temporary. They were to protect us. They were to look after us. But the structures, have you noticed that none of those measures were temporary? It's over 5 years later and they still stand. Those emergency powers and digital grids, the surveillance, they're still here, and quietly, legislation in every country, quietly, the politicians, and the politicians actually don't make any of this up. It's people behind the politicians that do that. Bills, statutes, legislation was passed quietly while we were busy watching Love Island. No, I wasn't, but you know, you get my drift. So, the thing is, what happened in the last 5 years is that we didn't jump out of the boiling pot. And when I say we, I actually am looking at, some of us did jump out of the boiling pot, I'm one of them, and there's some other beautiful living men and women in here. They didn't, the majority didn't jump out of the boiling pot because the pot had become so comfortable and warm and balmy, and humans are lazy and they love instant gratification. Comfort is the most effective leash at all. I mean, we've heard it, life coaches teach us that don't get too comfortable. Feeling the uncomfortability pushes us, right? It allows us to jump from a small fish pond into a huge ocean, but that's scary to do. The system, I call it the GovCorp system, it doesn't conquer us through violence. It actually seduces us through convenience. And again, most of the attendees at the Freedom Summit every year of mySELFRELIANCE actually are in the minority, and they don't really fall into that group. However, just because we're a small minority, unfortunately, we need to expand, we need to share. We need to share this message for the program. Someone said to me the other day, oh, why do you have a YouTube channel? Why aren't you on Rumble? I don't want to be on Rumble. I want to speak to the programs. I want to speak to the ones on YouTube. And YouTube told me I can't have a paid channel. I'm okay with that, right? I can't have they don't actually take down my content. And I know it has a wide viewing, but I can't get paid for the content. But I'm not here to get paid for that content. This is my vision. I was put on this planet to share this, so I'm fine. I want to share to the majority, because the ones who are using Rumble are me, are you, right? So, we have some really good news. And I am very honoured that I get to work with Sev at Warrior Law every single day. It's the best thing I get to do. It's a privilege, because he has spent the last 30 years working out ways that we can still jump out of that boiling water pot. And it's not through rage, and it's not through fighting. And there are some, there've been amazing groups coming together, especially between September and now, who protest on the street, and I really admire them. And I get asked a lot, oh, are you joining the rally? And I say no, I'm not joining the rally because you're actually buying into what they want. They want Channel 7 News to show this rally of scary people, right? I would rather just sit quietly and put all my energy into what I can do. So, I don't want to fight the pot of boiling water. I'm gonna get burnt. I want to jump out. I just want to step aside. And I feel that if we just step aside, we can build something of our own. Now, we cannot get rid of the system. We just can't. So I don't want to focus on that. But I get to choose when I stand in that system and receive those services and benefits of the system. And then when I get to stand on my own jurisdiction highway with the right to self-govern and freely associate. And this isn't pie in the sky stuff. I'm all about meat and potatoes. I like fact. I even like the science. I like data. So this is about genuine international covenants, laws and treaties that actually exist on this planet, right? Not some pseudo-sovereign planet. So, I'm about realism and critical thinking. Something that through our doctorate education process, it seems there is a lack of common sense and critical thinking. So, like I said, since 2020, some very admirable truther, sovereign, freedom movements have risen, most with good hearts and pure intentions. Now, I don't want to be sovereign, actually. I choose to be self-reliant. I choose to have autonomy. I would prefer to be sovereign, but this is not an etymology class, so if you want to know the difference between sovereign and sovereign, you can check that out on the Warrior Law website or the YouTube channel. And again, I will share all of these resources to everyone who's come through the metaphoric, beautiful nature gate this weekend. So, we cannot live on privacy planet. And a lot of these truther groups, I think it's cowboy and reckless for them to share that we can now go live in the private. Like I said, no such thing. I checked with Elon Musk, there are no shuttles going to privacy planet this week. All right, so, but by saying that, I also believe we don't want to put our heads in the sand either, right? But let's focus, again, I've said this just before, let's focus on what we can do, not what we can't. So, first thing, breathe. Remember who we are. We are living men and women with divine reason. Did you know that we have that inside us? Through millions of years of evolution, our brains have divine reason, and something that the majority has forgotten about, especially in the last 300 years, is custodianship and responsibility. Instead of outsourcing our destiny, and how we're so used to outsourcing everything, right? All our decisions about money, that's an accountant. Oh, we need to have safe structures, that's a solicitor, right? Even, we go to a specialist and we outsource the decisions about our health. 9 times out of 10, most don't get a second or third opinion. We're outsourcing the responsibility is what we're doing when we do all of that. There's nothing wrong with getting mentorship, education, seeing a couple of specialists. But then instead of being reactive, we've forgotten just to sit with it, remember who we are, and then make our own embodied, educated decisions. And I actually don't believe you need to go to a university to do that. Places of learning have their place. Do you know the biggest place of learning is in here? In here? In here? We've had it all along. How do you think humanity got this far? Right? So, we need to remember, we need to take stock when we're breathing and say, right, every action we take leaves a paper trail or a breadcrumb trail of consent. So, every breadcrumb leads to where we stand now. We're at this fork in the road. So my thoughts are, and I spent many years being a youth worker and counsellor, and I would sit in front of a young person, and they're at a fork in the road, probably in crisis, and I would say to them, whether it's a professional job situation or a family connection situation or a relationship situation, we need to sit with it and go, right, what has been the fire trail that's led me here today, or the paper trail or the breadcrumb trail? And in this context, in the public GovCorp space, what has been the paper trail to lead me here? And then whatever decision I make right now at this fork in the road, in this relationship, or this business, or this traffic infringement, what's going to be the domino effect, butterfly effect, ripple effect moving forward? And I want us to have a longer look into the future about what that is. And then think, I'm no longer going to outsource the decision. I'm going to own this. I'm going to take ownership of this and realise that the ripple effect could be this. And I'm not going to blame anyone else. I'm not going to blame the government. I'm not going to blame my ex-husband. I'm not going to blame my grandmother for giving trauma to my mother, who's now given trauma to me. Buck stops with me. I'm going to take acknowledgement. I truly believe when we start taking self-responsibility, the universe opens up to us. This is where abundance truly is. So, before we act, we need to ask, what's the ripple effect? How will this create abundance or negativity? By doing that, this is very simple concepts of virtue and value. It's looking at how we move forward with clean hands, the law of equity, how we move forward with integrity. So this brings me to a concept called the Remedy Trilogy. Some of you may know it. I share about the Remedy Trilogy all the time. I believe that I am a living woman in this meat suit, and there's 3 parts of me. It's like a triangle, right? So I have my left butt cheek, my right butt cheek and my back. And I want to cover both butt cheeks, and I want to make sure no one can put a knife in my back while I'm living in this meat suit till the end of my days. So how are we going to do that? Because again, I get to work with Zev, and if you've never heard of Zev, I encourage you to go to warriorlaw.org and watch his interviews, watch his education. He must have a photographic memory. He would pretty much be able to name every bill, statute, piece of legislation, state, federally and internationally, like that. His technical mind is amazing. And then I'm all about, let's put this into layman's terms. Practicality, what can we genuinely actually do on the ground? Because I don't have Zeb's technical mind. So we're going to look at both butt cheeks today, not mine. I want you to think about your own, okay? And then we're also going to look at how to protect our back. I'm only going to touch on these concepts because we're hungry. All right. So,
Hungry for love.
the 3 layers of protection. This really is about the living path from being acted upon to conducting ourselves with standing. It protects 3 realms of who we are. 1, the life force living energy, your energy, sweat equity. Then we're going to look at about trust. Now, some of us have trust set up. I'm actually talking about the word trust. How do we know what entities and third parties we can trust? So let's start with ourselves and trust ourselves. It's about the structure of stewardship and asset protection. Now that's about our back. We want to protect our back at all times. And then we want to protect that other butt cheek. And that's the registered entity. That's the debt of fiction you lawfully can control if you choose to. I'm talking about the name, the all caps name on your birth certificate. There are some in this room who are very well versed on this. Now, it's a complex concept, so I'm just going to touch base on that. But we have a birth certificate, and it has a name on that birth certificate. That's the first contract that our parents unwittingly got us latched into. And from there was that ripple effect of more contracts on top of more contracts that bind us into that GovCorp system. So, each layer that I talked about there, me, a living woman, my life force living energy, my sweat equity, I'm the creditor there, I'm in credit with that. Then there's I call it the dead entity, that piece of paper with a name on it. I didn't create that, my parents didn't create that. That didn't happen when they were doing their magic business that I don't want to imagine. That brought me here. But you know what? I also want to protect my back because I don't live in unicorn rainbow land. You know, I do live in a garden fairy bubble, but I am a realist and I don't want to be naive. So I also want to have trust and protect what my life force living energy has worked so hard to bring about, right? And that's where we look at trust and also trust law. So I will definitely send you information about all those concepts on how they would practically work in the real world. Okay, so let's look at we're going to look after the left butt cheek. The left butt cheek, I'm only saying that because I'm left-handed. The left butt cheek is about protecting the most important part of me. Life force living energy. This is where it all begins. This is who you really are. In here. The living man or woman. The one who breathes, bleeds, builds, and loves. The one whose sweat, labour, and creative energy have real value. That's what they're trading off, hey? That's what's bringing them in the big bucks. Now, I don't believe life force energy can be owned, but it can be claimed if we choose to claim it. We just didn't know, because remember, they're only offering us tea and coffee. And I want the cold pressed juice in the bag, which is my own life force living energy. So I believe that when we forget this, we hand over that will to the systems, to the GovCorp, and they treat us like an asset to be managed and to make profit from. I'm not cool with that. The lawful protection of the living essence, this life force living energy, sits under several different jurisdictions, natural law and international covenant, not statute. So there are documents like the ICCPR, that recognise that privacy, dignity, and conscience are inherent. They are not granted, they are acknowledged. So I believe if we start anchoring ourselves in those principles and expressing that, let's make a stand through affidavits, through notices. We now take control back and we can lawfully assert my position as the creditor of the life force living energy. The system has been set up for me to be the dead debtor. I'm not their chattel to make profit from. This is the seat of my energy with integrity and service to all life. All right, now let's look at my back. I don't want anyone to put a knife in my back, and I'm sure that you would all feel the same about yourselves. Now, we've acknowledged our life force living energy. Now let's look at protection. Because no matter how well you stand, if your back is exposed, someone or some entity or GovCorp will try to stick a knife in it at some point. That's why this layer of remedy, we need to create our own armour instead of relying on the safety of theirs. So a trust separates stewardship from ownership. It says, I don't own this, I'm just being responsible to look after it. I'm going to serve it. And that statement alone actually lies in ultimate protection. Now, I'm not a Zev, and I haven't spent 30 to 40 years studying trust law, but Zev has. So again, go to warriorlaw.org. He has brilliant education at the moment regarding how a trust should look, and also trusts that aren't so great. The magic of a trust is in the deed. It's in the clauses of the deed, and not all trusts do the same thing. So, we must make sure that a trust is watertight. So a true trust deed includes things like a clear jurisdiction. Is it under natural law? Is it under equity? Privacy, confidentiality. We also need to have watertight defined roles. The trustee, the beneficiary clauses. We want to make sure that those nefarious parties who want to stab a knife in our back don't come at us through the beneficiary. We might say, oh, it's not ours, we're just the trustee. If they find out who your beneficiary is, they'll get to you through the beneficiary instead. So, when assets, for example, lands, funds, even creative works, are held in trust, they move beyond the reach of statutory seizure or reclassification. It's really important for those of you who have a trust or who are thinking about getting a trust, these simple concepts. A discretionary trust, make sure it's revocable, not irrevocable. Revocable means that changes can be made by the trustees from after the date of conception. Because as we know, what does GovCorp do on a regular basis, and even faster since 2020? They change the goalposts all the time. They quietly put in new legislation. So make sure whatever trust you have and whoever you get it from, that it is revocable, because that way the trust, and make sure there's a clause in the trust that allows the trustees to make changes. Don't rely on assumptions. People don't know they have a problem with their documentation until a problem arises. So make sure there is a clause in the trust that states that the trustees at any time can make changes by ways of private annexures or minutes. Really important. So that's about us looking after our back. It is our shield. Unfortunately, we have to have this. We don't live in rainbow unicorn world of naivety. We must have a shield against betrayal and also GovCorp interference. All right, so then we've got the right butt cheek to make sure we're looking after. We do need to protect the registered entity. That contract that I spoke about, the all caps name on the birth certificate that our parents unwittingly, they just thought it was a registration process. We do need to protect the all caps name because that's the debtor. That's not me. here, I'm the life force living woman over here, but that the name on the birth certificate. That's the data on that piece of paper. The registered entity in all caps. Now it starts with that initial contract. Then from there, we have other contracts that we get unwittingly bound into, right? Your tax file number, your driving license, your car registration, your passport, and the list goes on. That's the corporate fiction used to interact with that public system. They give us benefits, services, etc. Now we can't escape that. Like I said, we can't move to Privacy Planet. So sometimes we are going to have to stand on that public highway. How about we use it for our own benefit? Let's not destroy that contract. Now there are some other truther groups that say that we can reconvey to the land, and they say that law, LAW, stands for land, air, water. Now I've written poetry over the years, it's very poetic. Land, air, water, the word law, just look up etymology of the word law. It's not land, air, water, but it sounds great and I love it. But I want us to look at fact. So why do we want to reconvey we can't get rid of that contract? Why don't we use it for our own benefit? So that's where a concept called the Uniform Commercial Code process comes in. And this isn't a loophole. If you want to get out of anything, trust your intuition and gut. If your energy is trying to get out of anything, I truly believe that trying to get out of something will actually get you into more hot water. We need to do things that are transparent. I don't want to be looking over my shoulder all the time. So let's use the system against the system. So the Uniform Commercial Code process, when it comes to our birth certificate, is about lawful correction of the status. Now, Uniform Commercial Code process is not my area. It is Zev's. There are 3 or 4 living men, and I'm not being sexist when I say that, it's just they happen to be men, okay? There are about 4 living men on this planet that have perfected the Uniform Commercial Code, and they have covered all bases, making sure there are no holes to bung up, that there's no way to F you over when doing that process. It's not my area. Please have a look at warrattlaw.org for the process. But it does need to include some processes that are attached to the filing. So I want you to have a look at that. We can't just do a filing in some international trade and commerce system and think we're protected. We do need to make sure that these processes that we do in this alternative jurisdiction are acknowledged by the system itself. So I do recommend that if you're looking to go down these paths, that you do your education first, and you do make sure that through affidavits, notices, but also make sure they're legally bound and that they're acknowledged by the country that you're standing in. For example, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trading. So just have a look at the education on the website for that. Now, once we've done the Uniform Commercial Code process, this places your living being as away from the debtor, back to that living life force energy, the creditor. So that is the right butt cheek, the seat of lawful claim, and we're taking back control of that contract. Now, I'm about to touch on a concept that I think is the most important out of everything I've touched on today. It is our purpose, our mission, our service. I believe most of mankind, humanity, they've forgotten that, especially once we became into the debt methodology in the early 1900s. It's all about me, what can I get, that American Australian dream. By doing that, it became all about me and not about we. So those structures and those processes and paperwork, they're really, really important. But before that, it starts here. So I just feel that after we've made sure that we've looked after our left butt cheek, our right butt cheek and our back, that actually gives us the stability to not just look after ourselves, but it now gives us the space to serve others. I don't want to escape anything, I want to embody it. And I don't want the fight rebellion attitude. I want this to be about responsibility and restoration. Because through the remedy trilogy that I just spoke about, we then have the opportunity to no longer rely on the GovCorp system. This is where we can actually build those communities through trusts, through creating our own umbrella structures under international covenants, laws and treaties, not relying on the state and federal statutes that they quietly pass all the time. I would like to live a life without coercion and without their interference, thank you very much. I would like to live a life with purpose, with mission and legacy. And I think before we join that rally on Saturday, by all means, go for it. But before we do that, before we even start looking at these alternative strategies, processes, structures, I think we need to remember and ask ourselves, what is my purpose? What's my vision? What are my values and virtues? What's the point of me being in this meat suit right now? Because once you start embodying that mission, once you actually do realize what your values are, and you set that as the benchmark, that's when you then have the confidence, the empowerment to do these strategies like what Sev does. I don't know if you realise or know that Sev has number plates on his car that are not registered to the state, but they're not some sovereign gobbledygook sovereign citizen number plates either. They weren't written with cardboard and crayon, right? It's the Uniform Commercial Code registration number on his number plate, which when police stop him, at first they kind of think, what's this crazy bushman about? As soon as he shows that whole UCC filing process that I shared with you, which has been bound so it's legally binding, which has been notarized by a standard public notary, which then has been apostilled and authenticated by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trading, the police, he moves on. They move on because they've realized his registration isn't some gobbledygook, it's actually based on the system. This is what I'm saying. He didn't just do that overnight. He realized, well, what's the purpose of me being here? What's my value? When we start to realize, you know what is the legacy that we're going to leave behind? And what politician thinks about legacy? What politician thinks past their own career and pension?
None.
None.
Not one.
Not one. However, I think if we remember what our legacy is going to be, if I think what metaphoric trees am I going to plant, and some real ones too, but what metaphoric trees am I going to plant to make sure that I'm going to set up structures under international covenants, laws and treaties? Guess what? If people say, well, that's still in the system. Yes, I can't move to Privacy Planet, but I'm going to take the time and use the system against the system for the right to self-govern and freely associate. I don't want to be flailing in the wind. I don't want to cop heat from the government. There are amazing projects right now with purpose, mission, legacy. Some of them are education nature projects. Some of them are teaching about alternative wellness remedies. Last year, I was here in the space of Warrant Law with Zev, but also running a project educating about the wellness benefits of organic CBD oil. Now, I don't want heat from the Therapeutic Goods Administration. I don't want GovCorp coming along. I didn't want the police saying, oh, you can't sell CBD oil, da-da-da-da. I'm not selling anything to anyone. I am sharing knowledge and education to private members. It's private member to private member only. If they choose, if they feel aligned to give not me, but we, the association, some sustenance, a contribution for the projects, not to me, but to the association, and I have watertight bylaws which allow me the right to self-govern and freely associate under international law, I don't mind if they come over and have a yarn or knock on my door, because I can genuinely and lawfully show them the structure and paperwork that I'm not doing anything wrong. So, when we remember who we are, when we remember that we are life force living men and women, I think that is the greatest act of freedom that we can do. Protesting is fine, but I don't want to be on Channel 7 News and go into the rhetoric of the sovereign citizen movement. That's not my cup of tea. I believe...
There is no sovereign citizen.
Correct. Thank you.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. So that's why, Steve, that is why I don't want to be on Channel 7 News, because there is new legislation about sovereign citizens, which is an oxymoron. You can't be a citizen and sovereign at the same time. So, I want to not be part of the matrix, but I also want to make sure that I'm not flailing about exposed in the wind. So I'm going to choose to step aside, to no longer be in line, and I believe that we need to build that type of remedy together as a community by things like this Freedom Summit. So thank you for listening to my little yarn. I hope your tummy isn't rumbling too much. Some of these concepts are in depth, and those remedy trilogies are genuine processes that we can do lawfully. I'm down undercover for yarns at any time, otherwise go to warriorlaw.org. Tomorrow I am back for a Q&A circle where you can bring, I would like you to do some homework if you're coming back tomorrow. 1, go to warriorlaw.org. There is a plethora of free resources and education. And 2, jot down all the questions that you have about your specific situation, because this isn't a cookie cutter templated approach. Bring it tomorrow. Put me under pressure, and I will see you then. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel sort of compelled not to use the microphone to say thank you very much for applauding Jane. Can we have another round of applause? Thank you for sharing not just theory, but the kind of grounded, real-world wisdom that helps us all stand stronger, live more self-reliantly, and walk with awareness. If you'd like to explore more of what Warrior Law offers, they have an extensive library of complementary lawful education and resources at warriorlaw.org. For those here at the Freedom Summit, Warrior Law has a stall running this weekend, so please head over, as you just heard. When you're seeking remedy, direction, or just clarity on how to walk your path lawfully, we're here for genuine conversation, and I think it's really important that we talk to each other about these kind of issues.